handful that I would mention would be things like XRP Ledger, Hedera, Injective, Solana. Same thing with XRP. XRP has been around for a very long time. It's established itself as the winner in financial transactions, and a lot of people have adopted it as such. That will eventually become the next platform that all of Wall Street is built on. Once all that happened, it really gave Ripple and XRP the ability to go forward. I think the biggest risk, though,
비트코인을 디지털 금이라 한다면 알트코인들은 어떤 역할을 하는 자산으로 정의하시나요?
Yeah, so Bitcoin being digital gold is really like saying that it's a central currency that's recognized globally by people and potentially by governments as well and corporations. Bitcoin is becoming a currency that's not controlled by any government, but is used as a means of transfer of wealth between one group or another. And as you can see, even going back 5 years ago, Bitcoin was starting to be held on the balance sheet of publicly traded companies, and of course private companies as well. Tesla is a good example of a company that held Bitcoin as a digital currency standard. So that's why it looks like gold in that instance, where it's commonly accepted as a store of value, commonly accepted value. And as that acceptance grows, it should grow also in price due to the network effect. Other currencies like Litecoin and Monero are good examples of true currencies, just like Bitcoin, but are used for other things. Litecoin is digital silver because it's smaller amounts that can be transacted faster. So if you think about long ago, the wealthy nobles carried gold, but the peasants carried silver. And the transactions that actually occur on the Litecoin network are actually larger than the Bitcoin network because they're smaller amounts that are being transacted faster. So that's one category right there, digital currencies. The other category is the open source protocols or even the non-open source protocols. And those currencies are actually used as gas. I think about them like, when you play, games on your phone, for instance. You might run out of lives and then you have to use an in-house currency to buy new lives. That's what those really look like. They're powering the networks. They're not really meant to be a means of transaction between me and somebody around the world if I want to buy, say, a car or something like that, even though they have been used for those types of transactions. So XRP is what powers the XRP ledger, which is really powering a lot of financial transactions. Injective, Solana, even SWI are good examples of tokens that are powering a lot of the open source things. So it's very similar to utilizing your phone and paying your phone bill and powering everything that's on your phone, all the applications. So that's really how we look at all of that. And then of course you have the fun things like meme coins, which really power nothing, really meant to do nothing other than what we define it now in the US as more like digital art and digital collectibles. So think about those like baseball cards, meme tokens, kind of like Pingu, Pudgy Penguins, or Mog, or Pepe, or some of the more popular ones that we're looking at. They really are meant to be more of a digital collectible. But that's how we frame the different categories of cryptocurrencies, even though they don't all do the same types of things.
비트코인보다 알트코인을 더 좋게 전망하시나요?
Yes, in 2026, I do believe that a handful of altcoins are going to do really well. Most cryptocurrencies will actually follow Bitcoin, which I'm negative on this year. But a lot of, handful of other altcoins that are building real world products, tokenization, anything that's very involved in stablecoin transactions. Those are the ones that are going to have a very positive impact in 2026 while applications are being built on top of those platforms. The handful that I would mention would be things like XRP Ledger, Hedera, Injective, Solana. Those are the ones that are really focused on building a tokenization platform that will eventually become the next platform that all of Wall Street is built on.
미래의 패권을 쥐게 될 알트코인의 전제 조건이 있다면 어떤 것이 있을까요?
It's really adoption is the main thing that works. And one of the things that I look for is what are developers doing? There's a lot of independent developers out there that are building things. They're building new projects, they're startups. The reality is less than 10% of those are actually going to make it. So those aren't the ones that I am necessarily looking at anymore. I did look at a lot of those in the past because if there was one killer application that made it on top of a chain, then that chain would also benefit from winning. But what I'm seeing is firms like BlackRock and Intel and Oracle now building things on top of blockchains. And I'm watching to see where they're building. And where they're building is, they are partnering with XRP Ledger. A lot of them are using Ethereum as well, but the reality about Ethereum is they're actually forking the code off of Ethereum and building their own either private network or public network themselves. So I don't see Ethereum necessarily being a long-term winner. But I do see Hedera, XRP, and some other open source protocols being more long-term winners.
전문 분석가들은 일본 엔캐리 트레이드 청산 시 글로벌 위기가 오고 이때 유일한 해칭 수단은 XRP가 될 것이라 주장하는데요. 이에 대한 의견 있으신가요?
Yeah, we are definitely watching the Bank of Japan and their policy decisions at the moment. The Bank of Japan has effectively caused rates to go from under 1% to over 4% overnight. And the central bank on the one side is printing money, but on the other side, it's becoming quite restrictive. So that unwinding of the trade is certainly causing some concern and has caused dips in the crypto market. XRP Ledger, what's interesting about that is that a lot of central banks could actually build their own government-issued tokens for their currencies on top of that. And they are engaged in conversations for that to be done. Once that's done, it takes a little bit of power away from the central banks and leaves it more open to the people. And I do believe that XRP is a good hedge against that particular trade.
리플이 다른 비슷한 기능의 알트코인으로 대체될 가능성도 있나요?
Yeah, I believe that all cryptocurrencies have the opportunity to be replaced by a better, newer technology, including Bitcoin. A lot of people have really said that Bitcoin is the gold standard, and right now I do believe that it is the winner on the currency side, but if something faster and cheaper and more secure comes along, then it could knock it out. It's just like any other technology. Same goes with XRP. Now, the difference between these currencies is that for instance, Bitcoin has really established its place and has gotten buy-in and support from a large community of people that accept it as digital gold. Same thing with XRP. XRP has been around for a very long time. It's established itself as the winner in financial transactions, and a lot of people have adopted it as such. But I'm always on the lookout for something that can come along and displace technology. The important thing is that building continues to happen so that these tokens and these platforms that they operate on continue to be relevant and continue to implement the best new technologies available.
XRP에 대한 호재와 악재는 어떤 것들이 있나요? 2026년 전망은 어떨까요?
I think the biggest catalyst for XRP that is bullish is the ability of Ripple as a company to continue to build new products and to acquire companies that are building interesting things. So they will probably continue to do that through 2026. And there was also some issues with securities laws in the US that all got overturned. So once all that happened, it really gave Ripple and XRP the ability to go forward. I think the biggest risk, though, is there is a lot of competition out there, and there are some great blockchains that do things that are unique, that are fast, and there is there's not going to be just one blockchain to rule them all. There's going to be different blockchains for different uses, and the biggest risk is, again, a blockchain that does something better that is a competitor to it. But at the end of the day, I believe there's room for lots of blockchains.
비트코인 금과 달리 희소성이 부족한 알트코인들의 투자 가치가 있다고 보는 근거는 무엇인가요?
Well, there's two ways that I like to invest in altcoins. One of them is a direct investment where I buy and hold for a very long time. The other way is through trading, and you can trade in any market, whether it's going up or down. So I do have a view that 2026 is going to be a down market for most cryptocurrencies. So I don't really advise a lot of long-term or even short-term investors in this market. It's a great market for trading though. However, Bitcoin has come down quite a bit already. So it's already below $75,000, and I do believe it'll go as low as 65, maybe even 60,000. What that means is if you're a long-term holder of Bitcoin or even one of the altcoins that we mentioned, such as XRP, Litecoin, Solana, now's not a bad time to start buying, anticipating that eventually the market's going to turn the other way. It's impossible to really time the bottom of the market, but the markets have come in so much that I do believe that it's a good time to start making small investments now in anticipation for the market turning over.
비트코인보다 수십 배 흔들리는 알트코인 장세, 심리적으로 어떤 자세를 갖고 있어야 할까요?
Well, if you're a retail investor that is looking to make long-term investments, there are two factors that I would look at. The first one is I would look at the top 20 in market cap, because once they've moved into the top 20, then it's going to be a little bit more stable and not quite as volatile. But sometimes the volatility is a feature, not a bug. The second thing that I would say is look at where things are being built. And if you're looking at the top 20 and you're seeing a lot of activity and a lot of products being built on top of those blockchains, then that means it probably has a little bit of staying power. So some of the things that we're looking at that are top 20 tokens are our XRP, our Hedera, SWI is really interesting right now, as well as Solana. So those are the ones that are going to be a little bit less volatile, a little bit better long-term solution. And if you see people and developers moving away from those blockchains and into something else, then that's probably the right time to sell.
소액 투자 시 최적의 암호화폐 포트폴리오는 무엇일까요?
Yeah, look, I think a core portfolio is probably 5 of your favorite names. I think everybody's going to be a little bit different. You should pick the ones that resonates most with you. It's sort of like buying stocks, right? If you have Apple products, you probably want to buy Apple if you understand it and you think it's great. If you have Samsung TVs all throughout your house, you probably want to own Samsung. So same thing with cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin obviously is a strong core holding for most. I do believe that a lot of the upside has been played out in Bitcoin. So you're probably better off holding, tech stocks. But for altcoins, I think core holdings would include something like XRP, Solana, SWI. Those are the top that come to mind. I think Litecoin is extremely interesting as well. HBAR, CRO, BNB. Those are two that are really interesting that represent the exchanges Crypto.com and Binance. So if those are platforms that you use a lot and that you really enjoy, then that is probably a good core holding for you as well.
글로벌 시장은 이미 알트코인 ETF가 제도권에 안착하고 있습니다. 한국 시장 개방의 로드맵은 어떻게 예측하시나요?
Yeah, I think the Korean market is a very interesting market for ETFs. One of the reasons why is even though the US is a very large country, the won, Bitcoin, and won other altcoin currencies are often the largest pair trades. Several times, the Korean won will overtake the US dollar in pairs across several cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. So I think Korea is probably one of the strongest places for cryptocurrency investment. There's already investments directly into cryptocurrencies. And my hope is that South Korea will have an opportunity to actually launch ETFs in the very, very near future. So I'm looking forward to that day, and I think the best way that gets done is probably through positive legislation that helps that economy and helps the regulators begin to adopt crypto ETFs. Well, my final message to everybody is to be diligent, be patient, and employ really good risk management. Don't invest more money than you can afford to lose. As with anything, if you over leverage yourself and try too hard to make wins, the markets can at any time turn the other direction. So be very careful.